Today, we're going to make past events feel alive. Not just what happened, but what things were like. In Spanish, this is one of the most useful past tools you can learn, the imperfect. And don't worry, we're going to keep it simple. Think of it as the was happening, used to happen, things were like tense. It paints the background. It gives color. It gives atmosphere. It's the difference between a stick figure and a full scene with rain, music, and your cousin dropping ice cream on a shoe. So here's the big idea. Use the imperfect when you want to talk about repeated past actions, ongoing situations in the past, and background details like age, weather, time, feelings, and descriptions. In English, you often hear was, were, used to, or would for repeated actions. In Spanish, one very common form does a lot of that work. Let's feel it first. Cuando era niño means when I was a child. I'm not talking about one finished moment. I'm describing a period of life. Era, was. When I say hacía frío, it was cold. I'm setting the scene. When I say jugaba con mis amigos, I used to play with my friends, or I was playing with my friends, depending on context. Again, it's the background feeling. A memory trick. The imperfect is like the camera is still open. The scene is not boxed in yet. It's blurry in a good way. Soft edges. Background music. If the simple finished past is a photo snap, the imperfect is the video playing behind it. Let's start with a few superstar verbs, because you'll use them all the time. Era, from ser, was. Tenía, from tener, had or was for age. Hacía, from hacer, did or made. But in weather and time expressions, it often means it was, like hacía calor, it was hot. Iba, from ir, used to go or was going. And verbs like jugaba, comía, vivía, hablaba are all very common and very friendly. Here's a nice pattern shortcut. For many verbs, the endings are simple and repetitive. For our verbs, you'll often hear aba, hablaba, jugaba, caminaba. For ER and IR verbs, you'll often hear ia, comía, vivía, escribía. If you hear aba or ia in a story about the past, there's a good chance someone is painting the background. Let's make it active right away. How do you say, when I was little, I played in the park? Cuando era pequeño, jugaba en el parque. Cuando era pequeño, jugaba en el parque. Nice. Notice era plus jugaba. Was little. Used to play. That's the feeling we want. And a tiny side note, pequeño means small or little. You could also hear niña or niño in many sentences, like cuando era niño, when I was a boy, or cuando era niña, when I was a girl. Very natural. Now let's talk about repeated actions. If something happened again and again in the past, the imperfect loves that. Every summer, every Sunday, always, usually, often, sometimes. These are all clues. For example, de niño comía mucho helado. As a child, I used to eat a lot of ice cream. Every Sunday, visitábamos a mi abuela. Every Sunday, we used to visit my grandmother. Usually is normalmente or usually in storytelling often just comes from the verb and context. How do you say, we used to go every summer, in Spanish? Íbamos cada verano. Íbamos cada verano. Perfect. Íbamos. We used to go or we were going, depending on the context. Here with cada verano, every summer, it clearly sounds like a habit. One easy memory tip. Words like siempre, every day, cada verano, a menudo, often. Often invite the imperfect. Not always, but very often. Now let's move into background situations. Imagine you're telling a story. You want to say what the weather was like, how old you were, what the house was like, what people were doing around you. That's imperfect territory. How do you say it was raining in Spanish? Llovía. Llovía. Yes, llovía. A lovely story word. Llovía. Hacía frío. Había mucha gente. It was raining, it was cold, there were many people. These are classic background lines. Quick helpful detour. Había means there was or there were. Same form for both. Había un perro. There was a dog. Había muchas personas. There were many people. Very useful in descriptions. How do you say I was 8 years old in Spanish? Tenía 8 años. Tenía 8 años. Good. In Spanish, age uses tener, to have. So not I was 8 years old with ser. Instead, tenía 8 años. Literally, I had 8 years. It sounds funny in English, but in Spanish, it's completely normal. Your age is something you have, not something you are. Spanish said, "Here, hold these years for me." How do you say the house was very small in Spanish? La casa era muy pequeña. La casa era muy pequeña. Exactly. Era muy pequeña. Description, background, setting. Now a very important feeling difference. Sometimes learners want to use the imperfect for every past sentence. But if you're talking about a completed event, a one-time action that moves the story forward, Spanish often switches to the finished action past. We'll only touch this lightly. Listen to this contrast. Llovía y caminaba al mercado. It was raining and I was walking to the market. That's background, scene setting, ongoing action. Then suddenly, compré pan. I bought bread. That's the action that lands, the event. So the imperfect sets the stage and the finished action steps onto it. Think, imperfect equals the movie background. Finished past equals plot point. Let's try another one. How do you say we were living in Madrid in Spanish? Vivíamos en Madrid. Vivíamos en Madrid. Great. Vivíamos en Madrid. That tells me about a situation in the past. It doesn't focus on the start or end. It just gives me the lived reality. How do you say, my grandmother always made soup in Spanish? Mi abuela siempre hacía sopa. It was cold and I was tired. Se decía, hacía frío y yo estaba cansado. Hacía frío y estaba cansado. Hacía frío y estaba cansado. If you're speaking as a woman, you'd say cansada. Small change, big usefulness. How do you say every night we watch television in Spanish? Cada noche veíamos la televisión. Cada noche veíamos la televisión. Excellent. Veíamos. That ES sound is a strong clue. Now, common mistakes to avoid. First, don't automatically translate English was with one single Spanish verb choice. For age, use tenía, not era. So, tenía 10 años, not era 10 años. Second, don't force a finished action into the imperfect if it's clearly one completed event. If you say, ayer llovía todo el día, yesterday it was raining all day, that can work because it describes an ongoing situation. But if you say, ayer llegué a casa a las 6, yesterday I arrived home at 6, that arrival is a completed event. Third, watch out for overusing subject pronouns in Spanish. You usually don't need them. Jugaba en el parque sounds natural. Vivíamos en Madrid sounds natural. The verb already tells you a lot. And one more useful trick. Pair time markers with the feeling. Cada verano, siempre, de niño, cuando tenía 7 años, por las tardes, normalmente. These naturally pull you toward the imperfect because they open a window into repeated or ongoing past life. Let's do a final little flow together. I'll say the English, You say the Spanish in your mind. How do you say, when I was a child, it was always hot in summer? Cuando era niño, siempre hacía calor en verano. Cuando era niño, siempre hacía calor en verano. How do you say we lived near a river in Spanish? Vivíamos cerca de un río. Vivíamos cerca de un río. How do you say, my father worked at home in Spanish? Mi padre trabajaba en casa. Mi padre trabajaba en casa. How do you say, there were many trees in Spanish? Había muchos árboles. Había muchos árboles. Beautiful. You're not just learning forms, you're learning a feeling. The imperfect is the tense of memory, routine, atmosphere, childhood, weather, age, and description. If it helps, remember this line, not the event, but the world around the event. So here's your quick recap. Use the imperfect for repeated past actions, like jugaba, iba, veía. Use it for background and ongoing situations like llovía, hacía frío, vivíamos allí. Use it for age and description like tenía 8 años, era pequeña, estaba limpia. And when you tell a story, let the imperfect paint the scene. You're doing something important here. You're learning how to sound more human in Spanish, not just correct. Stories, memories, childhood moments, all of that gets easier with this tense. Keep listening for those aba and ia endings, and keep asking yourself, is this the background? If yes, you're probably right on track. Muy bien. Lo estás haciendo muy bien.